Shalom Aleichem. We are in Parashat Beha'alotecha, which means when you raise up the flame of the menorah. We are in the book of Bamidbar, and the book of Bamidbar has a lot of stories that are seemingly negative towards the Jewish people. In the book of Bamidbar, we speak about the complaints of the Jewish people. We speak about the incident with the spies, where they didn't trust God. We see again and again during the first year and a half, they complained, didn't want to travel further, wanted to go back to Egypt. They complained that there was not enough food, that there was no water. They were questioning Moshe's status as the king and Aaron's status as the Kohen. And we may ask a question: how is it that God chose these people to give them the Torah, to be the light to all the nations, to make the covenant with God, to become eternal and immortal, when we see the Jewish people are doing so much against God? So much so that in this week's Parsha, the sages point out that the Torah has upside down letter Nun twice. In the middle of the Parsha, there is upside down Nun. Then 2 verses later, another upside down Nun. And the sages say, why? They say because the Jewish people sinned when they left Mount Sinai. Even though God told them to leave, but they should have left with a heavy heart. They should have left without the desire, but they showed that they're really happy. The Torah stresses that they went as if little children are running away from school. Instead of walking slowly, instead of saying, why don't we stay here a little bit longer? It looked like they tried to run away as fast as possible so that the teacher doesn't give them more homework. So too the Jewish people, as soon as they were told that they can leave Mount Sinai, they traveled fast. So this was their first mistake in this week's Parsha. And then there was another mistake that they started complaining against man. And then they started complaining against additional laws in the Torah, for example, forbidden marriages. So the sages say that since these three mistakes are in a row, at least they are listed like that, not necessarily they happened in a chronological order, but the Torah doesn't want that the Jewish people should be labeled as sinners, because we have a rule that if you do something 3 times, it becomes a habit. It turns into a consistent behavior. And we can assume that if a person did something 3 times, he will probably continue doing it. And so the Torah wanted to break this sequence, and therefore it put strange upside down looking nuns that look like parentheses, as if to say that these two verses don't belong here. They are taken from somewhere else and inserted here on purpose to serve as a barrier between one sin and two other sins, that the Jewish people should not be labeled as sinners. So, yeah, we can say that the Torah broke the sequence in the text, but what about the nature of the Jewish people? Didn't they do these three sins one after another? They actually did. How can you, in the text, break it and therefore pretend that it didn't happen? It did happen. So how does it help? So this, we will answer this question towards the end of our class, but we have to realize that the Jewish people spent 40 years in the desert, and they were difficult years. Yes, they were provided with everything they needed. Man was their food. Water from the rock was their drink. Clouds all around were like the walls of their city protecting them. Cloud on top of them was protecting them from sun and rain. Their clothing grew on them. Their shoes stayed strong and grew as the children were growing. They were taken care of physically. But the time that they spent in the desert was a big test for them, because not knowing what they're going to eat tomorrow made them worried. Man falls once a day, early in the morning. You walk out, you collect, and you have to manage with it until the next morning. And whatever is left till next morning will go to waste. It either melted, if it was on the ground, or if it was in their home, it became infested with worms overnight. So time and again they saw that they cannot plan for future. They cannot save up. Whatever they are given finishes, and they don't know what's going to be tomorrow. Imagine going to sleep at night and the refrigerator is empty and there is no water in the faucet. Nothing to drink and nothing to eat. And like this every night they go to sleep and they know that their resources are gone. There is no water and no food. In the morning they wake up and they hope they'll find man. They open the door and they close their eyes. Is the man there or not? They open. Oh, Baruch Hashem, man is there again. Just like it was yesterday. They go to the rock and they say, will the rock give me water again today like it did yesterday? Who knows? It's a rock. And yes, the rock gives water. So it's not an easy way to live your life when you have to rely on someone else. The Talmud says that who is considered poor? Someone who needs to go to the bakery to buy bread, which means he doesn't have his own resources. He doesn't have flour, he doesn't have grain, he doesn't have a mill, he doesn't have an oven. He must go to the bakery to buy bread. So a person who doesn't have enough for tomorrow is considered poor. The Talmud further says, who is considered poor? Someone who doesn't have enough cash, doesn't have enough money to last him for 1 year. Which means, let's say you stop working today. Do you have enough resources to last you for 1 year? If yes, you're lucky. But if you don't have enough resources to last you for 1 year, then you are considered poor. Nowadays, being that we are not farmers, most of us are actually in this category because we don't have enough food at home to last us for a year. And if stores close, if bakeries close down, and there is no food to buy, will we be able to survive for a year? For most people, the answer is no. But nevertheless, we're not worried because we rely that the store will still be open, the bakery will still bake bread, we will still have money, we will still have jobs. But the Jewish people in the desert didn't have this security. Not only they didn't have anything, empty tent, empty house, but there were no stores either. They were in the desert without any plan, without any way to get out of that situation. So that this was one of the ways that Hashem tested the Jewish people. However, there was another way, and that was that Hashem did not give a plan to the Jewish people about when to travel. The Jewish people were all on a constant alert. Men, women, children, elderly, animals, all their possessions, they were like homeless. There was no security. Any moment that the clouds rise up, it's a sign that Jewish people have to pack their bags, fold their tent, put their children and their possessions on the wagons and donkeys, and they have to start walking to their next destination. How long the travel will be, they don't know. When they finally arrive to their destination and they unpack their bags and they set up their tent again, how long will they be stationed there? They don't know. It might be a couple months, if they're lucky. It might be even a year or more, but it might be only 1 week, or it even might be 1 day. And all their unpacking will now have to be repacked. They're constantly vigilant. Do I have to go or not? More than that, what if someone doesn't like their current place and they say, you know what, I want to move. I want to travel. Let me go to the new place. They can't. Until the clouds rise up, which is a sign that God gives them permission to travel, they have to stay. They say, maybe tomorrow the clouds will rise. They wait until tomorrow, and again, the clouds are there the whole day. And they don't like it, for whatever reason. They want to travel. They want to get to the land of Israel. the Holy Land, the Promised Land, faster. And they can't. They're just sitting and waiting. Sitting and waiting. So this was a classroom. This was a training ground, boot camp for the Jewish people to train them in something very significant. And that was humility in front of God and submitting to the will of God. And when the Jewish people failed in it, with the story of the spies, when Hashem told them, go and conquer the land, which we will learn about in next week's Parsha, and the Jewish people said, no, God, you know what? We don't want to go. We want to stay. Hashem said, what? You don't trust me? You don't obey me? I will have to increase your travel time. Instead of just a year and a half, it's going to be 40 years. And our sages say that a similar thing happened when the Jewish people were in the land of Israel with the temple built, but nevertheless they were worshipping idols and committing other sins. And Hashem said, you're not submitting your will to my will. You're not listening to my command. Therefore, I will exile you among the nations of the world, where you will be forced to learn how to be humble. You will be forced to submit yourself to someone else's will. You didn't want to have one master over you, God. You will be forced to have many masters. It was the opposite of our exodus from Egypt. When we left Egypt, Hashem said, until now you had many masters. The Egyptians were telling you to do worthless things. They were torturing you. I took you out so that you should no longer have human masters, but rather you should have the ultimate master of the world as your boss. And I took you through the training of 40 years so that you finally believe in me, that you finally trust me and submit yourselves to my will. I brought you to the land of Israel. I helped you conquer it, to build the temple. And I was hoping that from now on, listening to God, you will have perfect existence. From your land, you will be the light to the nations, like in times of Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, when he was so famous that all the nations of the world came to witness the glory of God and to witness a society that is functioning perfectly. But the Jewish people, being that we are stubborn and we are, after all, people, we followed our own decisions and we abandoned God. So Hashem had to send us into Babylonian exile for 70 years. After which we came back and we rebuilt the temple. And again we failed to submit ourselves permanently to God. And again we rebelled, and Hashem said, this time I'm going to increase the exile. I see that just 70 years after 70 years of Babylonian exile is not enough for you. Therefore, I'm going to give you 2,000 years of exile. And I will send you not only to Babylonians and Persians and Medes, only 3 nations, I will send you across the entire world. You will go from one country and learn how to live peacefully with that nation, and then you'll have to go to another country and learn how to live peacefully in that nation, and each nation will try to subjugate you, persecute you, and you will have to keep your head down and say, I didn't listen to God, and now I'm forced to be patient and wait until God redeems me from these nations. And Rav Hirsch, among many other Torah leaders, he says that that is the purpose of exile, that we have to learn patience, we have to learn that without God we don't move, we don't take an action. And even in our current exile, in the 21st century, we have to behave the same way that God wanted us to behave when He sent us into exile, which means we have to behave with humility, not only towards God, but even towards other nations. We cannot rebel against other nations. Our country, the Torah says, the law of the country becomes your law, Dina de Malchuta Dina. The law of your host country is the law for you as well, as long as it does not go against the Torah. If it's in addition to Torah, then we are obligated to follow the law of the land, because this teaches us to follow rules, to submit ourselves, to do things even when we don't want to do them. We cannot rebel against God and say, God, take us out of here. We want to go back to our land. We have to patiently wait until the right time comes, and only then we will be able to go to the land of Israel. Now, about 80 years ago, there was a big question that the leaders of the Jews had to deal with. Should we travel in masses from Europe and other countries to the land of Israel and establish our own country or not? And the sages have decided that every individual is allowed to travel to the land of Israel and live there, because it is a mitzvah to live in Israel. However, we cannot gather masses and armies and organize ourselves to travel to the land of Israel, because we have been sent out of Israel by God, and we can only be gathered into Israel by God Himself. On an individual level, every individual can travel and do whatever he wants. We are allowed to live in Israel, but on a national level, we are not allowed to rebel against the nations of the world and try to conquer the land of Israel. This was the decision made. However, after the Holocaust, after the Second World War, things changed, and many Jewish people tried to come to the land of Israel because many of them had nowhere to go. And it so happened that people who didn't listen to the sages, and they took the matter into their own hands, and they organized various military groups in Israel. They started fighting against the local government, be it whether Turkish before or British during the World War II, before and during and after. And they started fighting against the Arabs, and they started fighting against each other. Unfortunate turn of events. Many Jewish people were killed, sometimes by the hands of the other Jewish people. Many Jewish people were killed by Muslims, by British. It was not good. Until Hashem had mercy on us, and miraculously the nations left us alone. And they allowed us to create our own country. And since then, the sages have been divided. And there is an argument. Is it still proper to abstain from fighting for the land of Israel in an organized way? Or perhaps once we have been granted our own country by the United Nations, which means all the nations voted and they decided that time has come for the Jewish people to have their own country. And this argument continues until today, with some saying that Hashem still did not approve that we should leave exile and go en masse to the land of Israel and fight for it. And some say, yes, originally Hashem didn't approve, and it was wrong of the secular communists from Russia to fight, to take the matter into own hands and kill each other, as well as the non-Jews, to establish the state. But once the state is established, we are allowed to continue live in it and to run our government. You can choose whatever side you decide after doing your proper research, be it as it may. The point is that we see that whether we live outside of the land of Israel or we live inside the land of Israel, we still don't have peace. We are still under the domination of other nations. If we live outside of Israel, whichever country we live in, we have to follow their rules. We can't do whatever we want. In the United States, we can't even speak publicly against whatever immoral things they do. If you run a business and an immoral person comes to you and asks you to serve him, you cannot openly refuse on the grounds of your religion. Religion is being persecuted here. And it reminds us, even in the United States, and all the more so in every other country in the world, that we are still in galut, in exile. That Hashem is still not satisfied with our humility, with our submission to authority. And it's not getting better, because we see that the Jewish people have learned to use the system. They fight against the non-Jews, they fight against the government, they sue each other and everyone else. They protest, they complain against the government. And our sages have said that this kind of behavior will only prolong our exile. And in the land of Israel, the situation is no better. We are afraid of the Arab countries who are trying to kill us. We are afraid of Europe and the United States, who are dictating to us how to protect our own citizens. And we are under the dominion of the same secular communists and atheists who are not letting us be religious and serve God in the promised land. In the Holy Land, a Jew is not allowed to be observant, unfortunately. And the religious Jews in Israel face a lot of persecution, anti-Semitism from the secular Jews,